Imagine a chilling dawn in the year 1241, where the Hungarian plains are cloaked in a ghostly mist, hiding secrets of an epic clash about to unfold. In the heart of this eerie landscape, 100 Viking warriors stand shoulder to shoulder, their breaths steaming in the frigid air, hands clenched tight around axes and swords. They've journeyed far from their icy fjords and sturdy longships to confront a foe so fearsome, so alien to their world, that it feels like a nightmare come to life. Suddenly, a terrifying rumble breaks the silence, growing louder, shaking the ground beneath their feet. It's not a storm from the skies, but something far worse. 10,000 Mongol horsemen charging through the fog, their war cries piercing the air like the screams of unleashed spirits. Welcome to a story that isn't just a battle, but a staggering test of human will. A collision of two mighty warrior cultures with everything on the line. This is the tale of 100 Vikings defying 10,000 Mongols. A confrontation so impossible, so staggering, that it feels like a legend forged in fire and blood. Let's set the stage for this extraordinary moment. On one side we have the Vikings, fierce, battle-hardened warriors from the cold north, known for their brutal close combat, their unyielding shield walls, and a wild, almost supernatural rage they call berserker fury. On the other side, the Mongols, the ultimate cavalry force of history, builders of the largest empire the world has ever seen, stretching across continents with a speed and ruthlessness that stunned entire civilizations. This isn't just a fight between men, it's a clash of two ways of war, two visions of dominance. The numbers alone, 100 against 10,000, make this seem like a hopeless cause, a story that should end before it even begins. But what makes this battle so gripping, so unforgettable, is the sheer quality of the warriors involved. These aren't ordinary soldiers. These are the best of the best, the elite of two legendary peoples, each carrying the weight of their culture's greatest military traditions. The Vikings, for starters, were a force of terror across Europe for centuries. Their long ships struck like lightning, raiding villages and cities, leaving kings trembling and common folk whispering tales of sea demons. They weren't just raiders. They were masters of war, skilled in ambushes by sea, sieges on land, and brutal hand-to-hand fighting. Their belief in Valhalla, a warrior's paradise where the brave who die in battle feast with gods, turned death into a reward, not a fear. This wasn't just courage. It was a deep spiritual drive that made them fight harder when the odds turned grim. Their weapons were works of art, forged by master smiths over months. A Viking sword, made of folded steel, could slice through armor and bone with terrifying ease. Their round shields, often made of sturdy wood and bound with iron, weren't just for defense. They were part of a system, working in harmony with spears and axes to create a wall of death. Their shield wall formation, a tight line of overlapping shields, had stopped cavalry charges for hundreds of years, turning a group of men into a single, unbreakable barrier. But the Mongols charging toward them through that misty dawn were something else entirely. They weren't just warriors, they were a revolution on horseback. Under leaders like Genghis Khan, they changed the rules of war forever. Their composite bows made of wood, horn, and sinew could hit targets with deadly accuracy from distances that made European weapons look like toys, sometimes up to 300 meters away. Their horses weren't just rides. They were partners in battle, bred for speed and endurance, trained to charge and retreat with precision. What made the Mongols truly unstoppable wasn't just their skill, but their organization. They fought as one, with a discipline that European armies wouldn't match for centuries. Units moved together like pieces on a chessboard, executing complex plans at full speed, adapting to chaos without losing focus. In just 25 years, They had conquered more land than the Roman Empire did in 400, sweeping through China, Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East with a mix of raw power and brilliant strategy. Now, let's picture the battlefield itself. The Hungarian plains, a vast open stretch of grassland that plays a huge role in how this fight might unfold. For the Mongols, this terrain is a dream. The flat, endless space is perfect for their cavalry, letting them charge at full speed, swing around for hit-and-run attacks, and shower arrows from every direction. With no hills or forests to hide behind, the Vikings have nowhere to retreat, nowhere to break the Mongol momentum. But this same open ground gives the Vikings a sliver of hope. Without obstacles to disrupt their formation, they can hold their shield wall tight, keeping their lines solid against the storm of arrows and horses. The flat terrain also means they can see attacks coming from far off, avoiding the deadly surprise tactics the Mongols often use to crush their enemies. The hard, firm ground underfoot lets their heavy infantry stand strong, each warrior like a rock against the crashing wave of Mongol riders. Now, let's dive deeper into the numbers and the brutal reality of this fight. When historians look at ancient battles, they don't just count soldiers and weapons. They study everything: how troops are supplied, the lay of the land, the weather, the mood of the fighters, the skill of the leaders, and countless other details that tip the scales between victory and defeat. In this impossible matchup, every single factor creates a puzzle that even today's military experts can't fully solve. The Vikings, despite their small numbers, aren't the wild barbarians of old stories. These are trained professionals, experts in fighting on land and sea, in breaking castle walls and boarding enemy ships. Their culture shaped them to see battle as the ultimate test, death as the ultimate prize. Facing them, the Mongols bring not just overwhelming numbers but a system of war that's almost machine-like in its efficiency. Coordinating 10,000 horsemen isn't just a matter of shouting orders. It's a feat of planning and control that few armies in history could pull off. Let's think about the mental game at play here. Picture yourself as one of those 100 Vikings, standing in formation as the mist parts to reveal 10,000 enemies bearing down on you. These are men used to being the hunters, the ones who strike fear into others. Now they're the prey, facing a force whose cruelty and power match their own dark legends. Fear would be natural, even expected. But Viking culture turned fear into fuel. Their songs and sagas spoke of dying gloriously, of joining the Einherjar, the chosen dead who would fight with the gods at the end of the world. This wasn't just storytelling, it was a mindset, a way to turn terror into raw, unstoppable energy. Most armies facing such odds would break and flee. Vikings were built to fight harder the worse things got. On the other side, the Mongols had their own mental edge. They saw themselves as unstoppable, the chosen conquerors of the world. They had never faced a loss they couldn't overcome, never met an enemy they couldn't outlast or outsmart. Their confidence wasn't arrogance, it was built on a foundation of endless wins. They didn't charge into battle with blind rage, but with cold, calculated focus, seeing the Vikings as just another problem to solve. Leadership in this battle would be everything. For the Vikings, their commander, likely a jarl or battle-tested king, would need to be a genius on the fly. Every decision, every shout, would have to keep the shield wall strong while finding any chance to strike back hard. A single mistake could turn a brave stand into a quick massacre. For the Mongols, even with their huge advantage, leading 10,000 riders is no small task. Their commanders would need to keep every unit in sync, avoid chaos in the heat of battle, and make sure their numbers didn't just create a messy crowd but a deadly, focused force. Both sides would rely on leaders who could think under pressure, adapt to surprises, and turn every small advantage into a game changer. As the two forces draw closer, the air fills with sounds that would haunt anyone who heard them. The Vikings begin their war chants, deep, rhythmic calls to their gods, Odin, Thor, growing louder, more fierce as the enemy nears. The Mongols answer with their own cries, a rolling thunder of voices that seems to shake the plains themselves. In the last quiet moment before the clash, time seems to freeze. Every warrior, Viking or Mongol, feels the weight of what's coming. For the Vikings, their shield wall locks tight, shields overlapping, shoulders pressed together, creating a barrier that stopped armies before. Behind the shields, spears stick out like deadly spines, aimed to pierce any horse or rider foolish enough to charge head-on. But the Mongols aren't new to this. They've broken shield walls from Europe to Asia, and their commanders already have a plan. They don't just charge blindly. They split their forces, sending riders in wide arcs to hit from the sides, to rain arrows from afar, to wear down the Vikings before the real fight even begins. The first wave of Mongol horsemen doesn't slam into the shield wall. Instead, they ride parallel, staying just out of reach of Viking axes and spears, loosing arrows from their deadly bows. Each rider carries extra quivers, enough to keep firing for minutes on end. With nearly 3,000 archers in this first attack alone, the sky darkens with arrows, a storm of steel that no shield wall can fully block. The Vikings, though, aren't strangers to arrow fire. Their shields overlap just right, covering as much as possible, absorbing the deadly rain with a sound like hail on a wooden roof. Some arrows slip through, striking flesh, drawing first blood. But the wall holds. The Vikings shout their defiance, refusing to break even as death whistles around them. What surprises the Mongols, and would shock any watcher, is how the Vikings adapt. When a man falls, the line tightens, closing gaps, keeping strong. The wounded fight on until they can't, and the dead are dragged back without breaking formation. The smaller the wall gets, the harder it is to hit, turning a weakness into a strange kind of strength. The Mongol commanders see this and shift their plan, showing why they've conquered half the world. They don't waste more arrows on a wall that's holding too well. Instead, a second wave of riders swings in from another angle, forcing the Vikings to turn, to stretch their defenses while still facing arrows from the first group. This is the Mongol genius, hitting from everywhere at once, keeping perfect order across separate units. The Vikings are up against a mind that thinks steps ahead, changing tactics as fast as the battle changes. Then comes the third wave, the most dangerous yet. Mongol heavy cavalry, mounted on bigger horses, armed with lances and heavy weapons meant for close combat. These warriors have broken every kind of defense, from Chinese foot soldiers to European knights. They ride in slow, patient, waiting for the arrows and maneuvers to open gaps in the Viking line. But the Vikings aren't done. Their weapons, axes sharp enough to cut through anything, swords blessed by their priests, are more than tools. They're part of who they are. Their fighting style, honed in sea battles and brutal raids, lets them shift and strike in ways the Mongols might not expect. As the heavy cavalry closes in, individual Vikings start to stand out from the wall. These aren't just faceless soldiers. They're heroes with names, with stories of raids and victories, calling on their gods and ancestors as they fight. The moment the Mongol riders hit the shield wall, the sound is unreal. A grinding, shattering roar of metal on flesh, of horses screaming, of men pushing past every limit. In that chaos, personal bravery shines through. Warriors on both sides do things that seem impossible, acts of courage and skill that would be sung about for years. This battle, whether it ends in Viking defeat or a miracle, tells us something bigger than who wins or loses. It's about what happens when a tiny group stands against an unstoppable force, when 100 men refuse to give up even when 10,000 seem certain to crush them. The cold math of war says no shield wall, no matter how tough, can last against such odds. History, though, doesn't just remember the winners. It remembers those who stood their ground, weapons raised, hearts unbroken, even when all hope was gone. These Vikings, real or imagined, on those misty Hungarian plains, show us something deep about being human, the drive to fight on when giving up makes the most sense. What makes this story so powerful isn't just the fight itself, but what it means. Courage isn't about knowing you'll win. Sometimes, the truest victory isn't in surviving, but in standing firm when everything screams to run. In that frozen moment before the final charge, those 100 Vikings did something 10,000 Mongols could never take away. They became more than warriors. They became a symbol, a reminder that even against impossible odds, the human spirit can burn bright. Their stand, whether it lasted minutes or hours, echoes through time, not as a tale of conquest, but as proof that some battles are won simply by refusing to break.